Thank you for the introduction. And I would like to start by just mentioning some aspects of behavior. So behavior is fast. Think about a rat running in a room and all the leg movements, or piano player with all the finger movements. And if an animal fails in a task, this can be for many reasons. The animal could be not motivated to do the task, or could be curious to explore some other suboptimal action at that moment. And changes in behavior can be subtle. For example, an animal could have 100% correct performance in a task, and still it could become faster and faster, slowly but surely as time goes on. And we asked, can we build a behavioral model that takes into account all these aspects of behavior? And in order to do so, let me first introduce our setup that we use in the lab. So welcome to the RIFF. This is a large arena for rats, where rats can run around and explore freely. It has 6 interaction areas shown on the right. Each interaction area consists of 2 poking ports, where rats receive food or water, and 2 loudspeakers that are used to convey information via sound to the rats. And the position of the rats is tracked via a ceiling-mounted camera. And the RIFF can be programmed to implement arbitrary tasks. For example, you could say that food should only be available when the rat is at a certain position at a certain time, or when it had a certain running speed 1 minute ago, or when it manages to poke into poking ports into a certain complex sequence. But here, I would like to present only one such task. And in this task, the rats have 3 different ways to obtain rewards. One is circling, shown in orange. Here, rats run around and can pick up food whenever they reach one of the white areas plotted here. The next strategy is back and forth, shown in pink. So here, the rats have to move backward and forward from the green areas to the white areas and can eat food whenever they reach the white areas. And the third strategy is sound guided, meaning that the rat has to wait in a purple area, then a sound is played, and the rat has to go to one of the white areas according to what the sound is and get a reward there. And rats can freely switch these strategies, so they can circle a bit, then they can do back and forth a bit, then circle a bit again. And they learn this task simply by being placed in the arena and finding out how to get rewards by trial and error. And this sounds complicated, but actually they learn it pretty quickly. So on the left side here, you see a rat that has been exposed to this task only for 5 minutes in her life. Before that, there's some habituation, but is a 1 minute trajectory from 5 minutes into the task. And the color is time. You see that the rat runs around a bit erratically, but nevertheless, it manages to eat 2 food rewards in 1 minute. On the right side, you see the same rat 1 day later. On each day, the training is about 1 hour. So on the right side, you see 20 minutes into the training session on the second day. And already here, the rat has learned to run a perfect circle. And here it manages to eat 7 rewards in 1 minute instead of just 2. And we quantified the success rate. So here you see bar plots for the first half of the first day and the second half of the first day. And on average, rats managed to successfully complete between 30 and 40% of trials. This means here that whenever there was food available, in 30-40% out of these cases, they actually managed to retrieve the food. And on the second day, this jumps up to over 60%. Every gray symbol here is an individual rat. There are 5 rats. But in the beginning, I listed these aspects of behavior, and so far I haven't covered any of them. So the first thing we do is to think about this task a bit more formally. And we're going to use the language of Markov decision processes, MDPs. And an MDP is a system in which the world is always in a well-defined state, and an agent, in this case the red, takes a well-defined action that brings the world into a new state. This comes with a reward or cost. Then there's the next action and the next world state. So this creates a sequence of state, action, state, action, state, action, where everything is well-defined, and every action comes with a reward or cost. And the state transitions are governed by stochastic metrics that depends only on the previous state and the action. And here's an example of how we describe a red trajectory in this MDP language. So imagine a red starts in this position denoted by B1. So the state currently is position B1 and no reward available. And the action is go to C1. The red moves to C1. This comes at a small cost, a small movement cost. Then the state is C1, no reward available. Next action is go to A2. Again, this comes with a small cost. The next state is A2, no reward available. The red waits a bit. This is for free. The next state is A2, and now a reward is available at interaction area number 2. So the next action is to eat and to retrieve this food reward. And here are some details of this MDP model. So we work with 22 actions, more than 3,700 states, and positive rewards are food and water. And the costs are movement costs and a body rotation cost. So if you look at the orange red depicted here, if this red now turns around and looks towards the center of the arena or walks towards the center of the arena, the red has to rotate its body. And this also comes with a cost. And this is a free parameter that I'm going to talk about more at the end of the talk. So now we can describe trajectories of reds in this formal language of MDPs. But at this point, we can also ask a different question, and this is if I have to solve the task, or if an artificial agent has to solve the task, how could we do that? So basically, if I have to solve this task, in every state, I have to know what to do. I have to know the probability of taking each action. So in each state, for each state and each action, we have to prescribe a probability of taking this action in this state. And this is called a stochastic policy. And what we need are good policies that if we follow them, we will retrieve a large reward. And there are many algorithms that do this. This is an old and known problem, so there's no difficulty here. And here you see a visualization of a policy. So on the y-axis, you have 200 states in this case, and on the x-axis, 22 actions. And the color code is the probability of taking each action in each state. And policies have two important properties. The first one is the value. Value of a policy is the expected reward rate if I follow this policy. And the next one is policy determination. And this is not so known, so I'll explain it a bit in detail. So basically, the principle of policy determination is how deterministic is the policy. Formally, it is the Kullback-Leibler divergence between the policy and the default policy where every action has the same probability. And here's an example. So imagine that we are in a very simple MDP with only one state and 6 actions. So we can depict the probability of taking each action as a bar plot here on the left. And the most simple policy is the uniform policy, where every action has the same probability, 1/6 in this case. And the PD, the policy determination, is 0. So then we decrease a bit the probabilities of actions 4 and 5 and increase a bit the probability of action 1. And the PD increases also a tiny bit. And if we continue with this process, PD also increases. And the other extreme case is the deterministic policy, where in this case, action 1 has probability 1, and the other actions all have probability 0, and the PD value is high, 2.6 in this case. So basically, if you think about PD, you can think about a scale between uniform policies and deterministic policies, and PD tells you where you are on this scale. And now I'm going to give you a bit of theory because I think it's quite interesting. So for every policy, you can compute its value and its PD, and this places every policy in this graph with a PD on the x-axis and the value on the y-axis. And it turns out that there's a certain region shown in yellow here where all policies exist. And there's another region shown in white where no policy can exist. So in other words, let's look at all policies that have PD 2000. So they are all on this black dashed line, and none of them can go above the blue line. So no policy with PD 2000 can go above the blue line. And so this means that the policies that are on the blue line are special, because they are the policies that have the highest possible value for their PD. And we use the parameter beta to talk about these policies. So in the rest of the talk, I will mention beta a lot. And it always means that we are talking about policies that have a certain PD and have the highest possible value for that PD. And we can compute them by a known algorithm called G-learning. And here are two examples. So on the left side, in the lower left corner, you see a policy with some small beta, and accordingly some small value, but still it's the maximal value for all these policies. And on the right side, you see a policy with a bigger beta and also bigger value. And again, it's the policy with the highest possible value at that PD. So enough theory, let's get back to the real rats. And ideally, what we want to do is to know the policy of a rat. So we could say that we could just take a rat and observe the rat and then estimate the policy. And then from this policy, we could compute the PD, and then we would know how deterministic the rat is and so on. This would be very nice, but it's not possible. There are just too many state action pairs. In our case, we have more than 80,000 state action pairs, and we just don't have enough data from rats to estimate any policies. So we need to do something, and there's a simple trick. And this trick is that we compute a large database of policies, in our case, several thousand policies. And then, given rat behavior, we choose that policy from the database that best fits the actual behavior of the rat. And in this way, we don't have to estimate the rat policy from the rat behavior. I'll explain it a bit more in detail. So imagine that we have a 1 hour trajectory from a rat, and we have our database of policies. In this case, it's parameterized with this body turn cost that I mentioned and the beta parameter. And then on the right side, you see for 2 body turn costs and many beta parameters, the goodness of fit expressed as log likelihood of the trajectory with respect to all of the policies. And the red cross is the optimal fit. So out of all policies that we have, the one with high body turn cost and some beta value above 0.06 best describes the rat trajectory. And now we can really go to the data and ask some questions about the behavior of the rats. And we want to know how deterministic the rats are. And we immediately look at this over time. So we look at the first 4 weeks of rats training in the arena. And for every day, we computed the best fitting beta parameter for, in this case, 1 rat. And every dot in the plot is this best fitting beta parameter. And you can clearly see that there's a nice increase over time. And it's almost a linear line. So the first thing we asked when we saw this was, so if we look at reward rates, do we also see a similar increase? And no, it's not the case. So these are the same sessions from the same rat, and we are looking here at rewards per minute. And there's a big jump from the first session to the second session. But after that, basically reward rates don't change much anymore. So what does this mean? So imagine you ask the question, for how many days do rats learn? Or more specifically, this one rat in this task, for how many days does learning go on? So if your measure of learning is reward rate, then you would come to the conclusion that learning takes 1 day or 2 days. But if you look at beta, the conclusion is that learning takes at least 4 weeks or continues over at least 4 weeks. And we would like to use the term refinement for this type of learning, where the behavior becomes more deterministic over time. So as beta increases, also the policy of the rat or the behavior of the rat becomes more deterministic, and we call this refinement. And we did this experiment in 5 rats, and in 4 out of them, we observed exactly the same thing. So there's refinement, beta increases over 4 weeks, but reward rates don't really change much over the same period of time. And we also wanted to look at one other parameter of behavior, which is the body rotation preference. So this is a bit complicated. I'll try to walk you through this slide. So what you see in the plot is a comparison of goodness of fit of 2 different MDP models. So we created one model where it's optimal to do circling, and one model where it's optimal to do back and forth. And we computed goodness of fit for a lot of trajectories to each of these models. And it turns out that in the first 4 weeks of training, the circling model always fits the animal's behavior better than the no circling model. So this is the same. So we asked, if we change something in the experiment, can we change maybe the behavior of the animals? And is this reflected in the model? So what we did is that after the 4th week of training, we switched off the rewards for circling. So we went to the physical task and changed it and said that for now on, circling is not rewarded anymore. We did that for 2 weeks. And then we switched the circling rewards on. So after the 6th week, there were the normal rewards for circling were restored. And how is this reflected in the policy fits? And actually, there is a big shift. So after this manipulation, the no circling policies fit the rat behavior better than the circling policies. So the rats learned to avoid circling, and even when circling rewards became available again, they stuck somehow to their old behavior of not circling. And this was very similar in all of the rats. And we can also look at this parameter over time. So at the lower part of the slide, you see all the days of training, and the blue dots are before the manipulation. The gray box is when the manipulation happened, and the red dots are after the manipulation happened. So you see that in every rat, this rotation preference, which is simply the difference between the model fits, jumped up. So meaning that the preference for circling was exchanged to a preference for non-circling. And I think what's interesting here is that the new value is quite constant. So once there's this change to the new value, it doesn't change that much anymore. And this constant also is individual per rat. So we have here some rat trade, individual rat trade. One last thing, which is quite preliminary, but I think nevertheless interesting, is we also recorded neural activity from, in this case, the left insular cortex of our rats. And here you see some example action potentials. And now we went into individual sessions. So instead of computing the best fitting beta for an entire session as before, we now went to 10-minute windows, overlapping 10-minute windows, and we computed the best fitting beta for each such window, and also the average firing rate of the neuron. And already from this plot, you can see that there is a strong correlation between beta and firing rate. And this is the same data again as a scatter plot. In this case, color is time. And actually, we find many, many such neurons that have either a positive or a negative correlation between their firing rate and the best fitting beta. but we still have to do statistics on this, and there's no final message here. So let me conclude. So what we showed here is that we can actually use an MDP model to describe a complex red task. Sounds maybe obvious, but I don't think it's that obvious. This strategy of creating a database of many policies and fitting them to trajectories showed refinement in red behavior over a whole month. And this was not visible in reward rates alone. And actually, we see this refinement over 170 days or more, just didn't include the plots. And we also see that our model is capable of tracking behavioral preferences, such as circling or back and forth policies. And all this is teamwork. So these are my wonderful collaborators, colleagues at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Thank you.